So, getting an agent. The thing about this is, it's one of the big questions people always want to ask, and yet getting an agent, I don't know that there's much more to say other than what we've already said. I've told you what an agent does. I've told you why you would consider getting one and why you wouldn't consider getting one. And then it comes down to, how do you land one of these agents? They are more difficult to find than editors because agents do programming conventions much less frequently. They're in the limelight, for whatever reason, much less frequently than editors are. And I think I mentioned to you before, editors seem to be like, they're the behind-the-scenes heroes on all books. And when they get to be at a convention where suddenly they're not behind the scenes anymore, they usually love it. And they're like, yay, people are paying attention to the awesome job I do. Whereas the agents don't usually do that as much, don't have that same sort of attitude about it. So landing an agent can be difficult. I got my agent by simply meeting him at the Nebula Awards, taking his card, sending him something, getting it rejected, sending him something else, having him like it but still reject it, sending him something else, having him like it, still reject it but give me feedback on it. Did that 3 or 4 more times till he called me and said, you really should revise one of these. And then I sold Elantris, and then I called him up and said, I do want to have an agent. Would you represent me? That was my route. I believe Pat Rothfuss's route is that he had a story in Writers of the Future, did very well. Kevin Anderson was one of the Writers of the Future's judges that year. He went to Matt Bialer, who is Pat's agent, who is also Kevin's agent, and said, hey, this thing's really good. It sounds like he's got a full novel complete for it. I'd look into it if I were you. I think it's a great story. Matt read it, liked it, and took on Pat as a client, I believe. You'll have to ask Pat that because I could be garbling a few of the details. But that's how he did it recently. So he did it the get an agent first way. But I really landed an agent by selling a book and then calling an agent and saying, would you represent me? Dan did the same thing. Dan had an offer on the book. He researched agents, found one he liked, called her up, said, would you be interested in looking at the book? She did. He actually called several of them and sent them all the book. He then went and kind of interviewed each of them after they've read the book, picked the one he liked the most, and went with them. So, boy, do all the things I said for editors. Start making a list of the big agents. But the thing to remember is there are a ton of scam agents out there. Much more than there are scam publishers, because it's easy to spot a scam publisher. They're asking you for money, and if you go and you look at what they put out, they will not be putting out any books that are on bookstores' shelves, and you can say, okay, they're either a scammer or they're a small press that doesn't get bookstore distribution. Let's go, to Absolute Right and see which of the two they are. If it's, a reputable small press, people will say, yeah, they've been around for years. They have very good contracts. Yes, they don't get bookstore placement, but they have all these other distribution methods, and they're well regarded. Nothing wrong with that, publishing with them. Or you'll get back they've had lots of disputes with their authors. They never actually pay out on things. They make lots of promises. They make rights grabs, but you never end up actually seeing books. Then that is a publisher you don't want to go to. Agents don't actually produce anything. And so it's much harder to track down. You can track down a publisher who's producing terrible books. But an agent, it can be a little more difficult. You go to a convention, they hand you a card and say, hey, I'm a literary agent. Send me something. And then you go to their website and it just says, hey, we're a literary agency, yada, yada, yada. And you're like, but who are you? Well, no one's out there deciding who can be an agent and who can't be. Any of you could say literary agent and put it on your business card and then hand them out to people. And so the best way to judge if an agent is legit or not is to ask them for a list of clients or look for one on their website and see who their clients are and see if you can find their bookstores on shelves.
But also if they have previous experience as an editor at publishing houses?
Yes, yeah, that could be good. But agenting works. In general, there are one of two ways someone becomes an agent. Number one, they apprentice under another agent. And they will be able to give you a list of books they've worked on, even if they've just started their own agency. They'll say, I was with, Jabberwocky Joshua Bilmes for 10 years. I apprenticed there. I worked on all these books, and now I'm starting my own agency. That, you can say, it would be an okay sort of thing to do. Usually agents don't do that. Usually they wait until the agency they're part of, till the person running it actually passes away, and the agency then splits into all the sub-agents running their own agencies. That's what happened. Joshua and a guy named Richard Curtis and several other people were working for Scott Meredith as his sub-agents. Scott Meredith died, and then they all went and took the clients that they had been working with under Scott Meredith and started their own agencies. That happens very frequently. Another main way that people become agents is what you just said. They work in the publishing industry for a long time and they decide to switch over. Almost always, those agents will go to a big agency house and say, I want to do this. Will you bring me on as an agent? And they'll work there for 5 years or so before they do their own. When they walk, they don't keep the contracts, by the way. Their authors may go with them, but the contracts they negotiated under that, Joshua's assistant, when he negotiates a contract, he's negotiating it for the company, which is owned by Joshua. So those contracts stay with Joshua, even if the agent moves on. But you were always it's understood that you're welcome to follow that agent because that's the person you've been working with, and things like that. So yes, people do that, but a lot of time they're apprenticing. That you should be able to get a really good feel for their professional agent by simply having a good client list. You email a few clients on that list to your websites. You can ask them what they think of their agent and go from there. But do beware of the scams. It's not 100% anymore, but agents usually are going to live in New York. If they do not live in New York, then I would say, this one isn't as hard fast, but I'd say 9 out of 10 times, they're not an agent who can help you. They may be a Hollywood agent who has decided they're going to jump over and start representing books. Well, the reason to get an agent, the primary one that I listed for you guys, is that they will have done all this legwork in knowing all the publishers and the different editors that work for the different publishers and the different thematic styles of all the publishers, and they will be able to lend you, a decade or more experience of knowing all those people so that you then don't have to have done all that legwork yourself. That's the most valuable thing that an agent will offer you. The second most valuable thing being real working knowledge of the publishing industry so they can work on contracts with you and all of that stuff. Someone who's living in LA knows nothing about either of those things most of the times. That said, there are a few solid agents who used to live in New York and have moved away and then just fly back frequently. So don't take this as an overriding thing, but be very wary of an agent who doesn't live in New York. The reason being that all the publishing houses are in New York. In science fiction fantasy, there's only one major publishing house that isn't in New York, and that is Baen, which is down south along the coast a little ways. There's also Wizards of the Coast, if you want to count them, but they aren't accepting author property books any longer, and they're in Seattle. But everybody's in New York, and so the agents are very frequently going and meeting the editors at all these parties and things, and they are making sure to keep all of their contacts up to date. That's their job. So if someone lives in Denver and comes to you and says, hey, I'm a literary agent, be a little bit wary. And if you ask for a client list, they may be pretty legit and give you a client list, and it will be full of small regional publications from people like Deseret Book and things like that, which would be fine if that's what you're wanting to do. There probably are a few agents that are legit that are doing that, but they won't be, they may send your book to New York, but they're not going to sell your book in New York. They'll say they have all the contacts and things, but if they haven't actually sold authors there, then they don't. Okay? Don't just take any old agent. Yes? Yeah, go ahead.
Does having an agent just come up and walk up to you and give you their card, is that a red flag?
Yes, it's a very big red flag. Agents usually have are not, unless there's a good reason for it. For instance, if you have just won Writers of the Future, an agent walks up to you and gives you their card, there's a decent chance they're legit. if you have won a big literary prize, or if you're at a convention and you have won, there's a short story contest and you've won the short story contest, and the agent comes up and says, hey, looks like you've got some writing chops. Go ahead, here's my card, go ahead, if you've got a novel, send me sample chapters. That could be a very legit agent. Chances are anyone else who gives you a card is not. It means they're actively soliciting clients. It means they don't work for a big agency where the name is bringing in clients. There's a chance that they might still be legit, but I have never actually run into one who was. I've run into a lot of well-intentioned people who think they're legit, who do that. And none of them actually turned out to be. Did you have someone do that?
No.
Okay.
I was just wondering, because you were saying if they walk up to you and give you their card, I wonder if that's a red flag.
Yeah, they shouldn't walk up, and they do that at cons sometimes. They go out handing out cards. I'm a literary agent, I'm a literary agent, I'm a literary agent. Yeah, red flag. Pretty big one. You had one back there?
What's your take on having advances routed to the agent?
Advances should be routed to the agent. It's what happens. If you pick up an agent, all the money is going to go to the agent, and then it's going to flow toward you, which is still the money flowing toward the author. But it's fine if it goes publisher, agent, author. That's what's going to happen. You should be watching to make sure that it's legit. They will give you the royalty statements that go along with it, and you can look and see if they're cutting you the right amount of it as a check. But they will get all the money.